Victoria Sterling stepped out of her black Tesla and immediately felt the chaos of Denver International Airport washing over her. The morning sun caught her perfectly styled blonde hair as she strode across the tarmac in her red bottom heels, each click echoing her frustration. Today was supposed to be the biggest day of her career. In just 4 hours, she would be sitting across from the board of directors at Technova Industries, ready to sign a deal that would make her company worth $3 billion, but now everything was falling apart. "Ma'am, I'm really sorry about this," her assistant Kevin said, practically running to keep up with her long strides. "The pilot says it's just a small mechanical issue." "They're already looking at it." Victoria's jaw tightened. She had built Sterling Tech Solutions from nothing, working 18-hour days for the past 8 years. She had clawed her way to the top of the technology world, where being a young woman meant fighting twice as hard for half the respect, and now some stupid airplane was going to ruin everything. "Small mechanical issue?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the morning air. "Kevin, do you know what happens if I miss this meeting? Technova moves on to our competitors. 8 years of work goes down the drain because of some broken plane." As they approached her private jet, Victoria could see a group of men in orange vests gathered around the aircraft. Some were pointing at the landing gear. Others were shaking their heads and looking confused. The sight made her blood boil even more. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What exactly is the problem here?" A man in a greasy coverall turned around. He had kind eyes but looked tired, like he had been working all night. "Good morning, Miss Sterling. I'm Jake, the lead mechanic. We're having some trouble with your hydraulic system. The pressure readings are all wrong and we can't figure out why." Victoria crossed her arms. "How long will this take?" Jake scratched his head. "Well, that's the thing. We might need to call in a specialist from the manufacturer. Could be several hours, maybe even tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Victoria's voice rose so high that several airport workers turned to look. "Are you completely out of your mind? I have the most important meeting of my life in 4 hours. I don't care if you have to rebuild this entire plane with your bare hands. Fix it. Now." "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but aircraft safety isn't something we can rush. If there's a problem with the hydraulics, the plane simply cannot fly." "It would be dangerous," Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dangerous? You know what's dangerous? Trusting a bunch of airport workers who probably never finished high school to work on a $15 million aircraft." The words hung in the air like poison. She saw the hurt flash across Jake's face, but she was too angry to care. Around them, other ground crew members had stopped what they were doing. Some looked away, uncomfortable with the tension. Others stared at her with barely hidden anger. "I want a real mechanic," Victoria continued, her voice getting louder. "Someone who actually knows what they're doing. Not whatever amateur hour this is supposed to be." "Miss Sterling," Kevin whispered urgently, "maybe we should just book a commercial flight." "Commercial?" Victoria turned on him like a snake. "I am not sitting in coach next to crying babies and people who think flip-flops are appropriate airplane attire. This is my plane, and these people are going to fix it." She pointed at the group of workers. "I pay enormous fees to this airport. I expect professional service, not whatever this disaster is supposed to be." Jake's face was red now, but he kept his voice calm. "Ma'am, my team has over 50 years of combined experience. We know what we're doing, but this particular problem is tricky. Sometimes the electronic sensors give false readings, and we need to manually check every component to make sure it's safe." "False readings?" Victoria threw her hands up. "So you're telling me this might not even be a real problem? You might be grounding my plane over nothing?" "We have to be sure," Jake said firmly. "I won't sign off on any aircraft that might put passengers at risk." Victoria looked around at the group of workers. Most were older men, their hands stained with grease and oil. Their uniforms were faded and worn. To her, they looked like exactly what they were: blue-collar workers who probably lived paycheck to paycheck. How could people like this possibly understand the importance of what she was trying to accomplish? "This is unbelievable," she muttered, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the airport director. Maybe someone with actual authority can get you people to do your jobs properly." As she dialed, she noticed another worker approaching the group. He was younger than the others, probably in his late 20s, wearing the same orange vest as the luggage handlers. He moved with quiet confidence, and she could see him talking to Jake in low voices. "Who is that?" she asked Kevin, nodding toward the new arrival. Kevin looked over. "I think he's one of the baggage handlers. Damon something." "A baggage handler?" Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. And why exactly is someone whose job is to move suitcases getting involved with aircraft maintenance? She watched as Damon kneeled down near the landing gear, examining something closely. The way he moved suggested he knew what he was looking at, but Victoria couldn't believe that was possible. How could someone who loaded luggage for a living know anything about complex aircraft systems? This gets better and better, she said sarcastically.
Now we have the baggage boy trying to fix my plane.
What's next? Are we going to let the janitor fly it? Her voice carried across the tarmac, and she saw Damon's shoulders stiffen. He looked up for just a moment, their eyes meeting briefly across the distance. She expected to see anger or embarrassment, but instead, his expression was calm, almost thoughtful. Then he turned back to whatever he was examining. "Ma'am," Jake said carefully, "Damon actually has some experience with aircraft systems. He might be able to help us identify the problem." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously telling me that you're going to let a luggage handler work on my $15 million jet? Have you completely lost your mind?" "Miss Sterling, maybe we should just listen to what they have to say," Kevin suggested quietly. "Listen to what? A baggage handler who probably thinks hydraulics is a type of energy drink?" Victoria's voice was getting shriller. "I want real professionals working on my plane, not whatever random person happens to be walking by." She could see the other workers exchanging glances. Some looked angry, others just seemed tired of dealing with difficult passengers, but they all kept working, trying to solve the problem that was keeping her plane grounded. Victoria felt her phone buzzing with notifications. Probably messages from her team, wondering where she was. The board meeting was getting closer every minute, and she was stuck here watching a group of people who clearly had no idea what they were doing fumble around with her aircraft. "This is a nightmare," she muttered, clicking her heels impatiently on the concrete. An absolute nightmare. Damon Rodriguez had been working at Denver International Airport for 3 years, but he had never encountered anyone quite like Victoria Sterling. As her harsh words echoed across the tarmac, he felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. It was the same feeling he got when professors at the university dismissed his questions, or when classmates assumed he was only there because of some diversity program. But Damon had learned long ago not to let other people's assumptions define him. While Victoria continued her tirade about incompetent workers, he focused on the problem at hand. The hydraulic system readings that had Jake and his team puzzled looked familiar to him. Very familiar. "Jake," he said quietly, approaching the lead mechanic, "can I take a look at those pressure readings?" Jake glanced nervously toward Victoria, who was now pacing back and forth while shouting into her phone about airport management. "I don't know, Damon. She's already pretty upset about you being here." "I know, but I think I might know what's wrong." The truth was, Damon had seen this exact problem before. Not in real life, but in the Advanced Aircraft Systems course he was taking at the University of Colorado. Professor Chen had shown them a case study about this specific model of private jet, and how a faulty sensor in the hydraulic system could create false pressure readings that would ground the aircraft unnecessarily. But explaining that to Victoria Sterling seemed impossible. She had already made it clear what she thought of him. To her, he was just another airport worker, someone beneath her notice. The idea that a luggage handler might know something about aerospace engineering was clearly beyond her comprehension. "The hydraulic pressure sensor on the main landing gear," Damon said to Jake, keeping his voice low. "I think it might be giving false readings. If the sensor itself is malfunctioning, it would explain why all your manual checks are coming back normal, but the computer is showing problems." Jake frowned. "That's actually not a bad theory. But how would you know about something that specific?" Before Damon could answer, Victoria's voice cut through their conversation like a knife. "Excuse me," she called out, clicking across the tarmac toward them. "Did I just hear the baggage handler giving technical advice about my aircraft?" Damon straightened up, meeting her gaze directly. "Ma'am, I was just suggesting that the mechanics might want to check the hydraulic pressure sensor. Sometimes these sensors can malfunction, and give false readings." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, her blue eyes cold and disbelieving. "And you know this how exactly? Did you learn about aircraft hydraulics while tossing suitcases around?" "Actually," Damon said calmly, "I'm studying aerospace engineering at UC. I work here part-time to pay for school." Victoria's laugh was sharp and mocking. "Aerospace engineering, really? And I suppose you're going to tell me you're at the top of your class, too? I'm doing pretty well, Damon replied simply. He didn't mention that he was actually ranked second in his program, or that he had just published a research paper on sustainable aviation fuel efficiency. Something told him that Victoria Sterling wasn't interested in hearing about his academic achievements. This is unbelievable, Victoria said, throwing her hands up. Now I'm supposed to trust my $15 million jet to someone who's playing pretend engineer while hauling luggage for a living. Kevin, her assistant, stepped forward nervously. Miss Sterling, maybe we should just hear what he has to say, if there's a chance he's right. Are you seriously suggesting that we listen to maintenance advice from someone whose real job is moving bags? Victoria's voice was getting higher again. Kevin, I thought you had better judgment than that. Jake cleared his throat. Ma'am, with all due respect, Damon has helped us out before. He spotted a potential tire pressure issue on a Boeing last month that our initial inspection missed. The kid knows his stuff. The kid? Victoria repeated incredulously. You're calling him the kid and you want me to trust him with my aircraft? Damon felt his patience starting to wear thin, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had dealt with people like Victoria before. People who looked at his work uniform and immediately decided they knew everything about him. People who assumed that anyone working a manual labor job must be there because they weren't smart enough for anything else. Ma'am, he said respectfully, I understand your concerns, but the hydraulic pressure sensor I'm talking about is a common failure point on this model. It's a Gulfstream G550, right? The sensor is located near the main landing gear hydraulic line, and when it fails, it sends error signals to the main computer even though the actual hydraulic system is working perfectly. Victoria blinked, clearly surprised that he knew the exact model of her aircraft. How did you? The registration number is visible from here, Damon explained, and I've studied the technical specifications for most private jets in my aircraft systems class. This particular problem with the pressure sensor was actually covered in a case study we did last semester. For the first time since arriving at the airport, Victoria was speechless. She looked from Damon to Jake to her assistant, as if trying to process what she had just heard. You're telling me, she said slowly, that my plane might be grounded because of a $50 sensor that's lying about a problem that doesn't actually exist? It's possible, Damon said. The sensor itself costs more than $50, but yes, that's essentially what might be happening. If Jake and his team want to check it, they could bypass the sensor temporarily and run a manual pressure test on the hydraulic system. If the manual test shows normal pressure, then we know the sensor is the problem. Jake was already nodding. That's actually a really good idea. We can isolate the sensor circuit and test the hydraulic pressure directly. If Damon's right, we could have you in the air within an hour. And if he's wrong? Victoria asked. Then we're back where we started, Jake said. But we haven't lost anything except a few minutes of time. Victoria looked at Damon again, her expression unreadable. He could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Everything about her body language and tone suggested that she didn't want to admit that a luggage handler might know something she didn't. But the clock was ticking, and she clearly needed to get to wherever she was going. Fine, she said finally, the word coming out like she was spitting out something bitter. Check the sensor. But if this is some kind of lucky guess that wastes more of my time, I'm going to make sure everyone knows about it. Damon nodded. That's fair. As Jake and his team began implementing Damon's suggestion, Victoria stood off to the side, her arms crossed and her expression skeptical. Kevin stayed close to her, occasionally glancing at his watch and whispering updates about her schedule. Damon, Jake called out after a few minutes, can you come over here for a second? Damon walked over to where Jake was kneeling beside the landing gear. The mechanic had a tablet in his hand showing diagnostic readings. You were absolutely right, Jake said quietly. The hydraulic system is showing perfect pressure when we bypass the sensor. The sensor itself is definitely malfunctioning. So the plane is safe to fly? Completely safe. We can replace the sensor when she gets back, but for now we can disable the faulty sensor and rely on the backup systems. The computer will show a warning light, but the aircraft is fully operational. Damon felt a mix of relief and vindication. He had been confident in his diagnosis, but there was always a chance he could have been wrong. Getting it right felt good, especially after Victoria's dismissive treatment. How long to fix it? He asked. Give me 20 minutes to disable the sensor and reset the computer system. She'll be wheels up within the half hour. As Jake worked, Damon noticed Victoria watching him from across the tarmac. Her expression had changed. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something that looked almost like confusion, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite make sense to her. When Jake finally gave the thumbs up and the jet's engines began to spin up, Victoria walked over to where Damon was standing. "You were right," she said simply. "Sometimes the simple explanation is the correct one," Damon replied. Victoria studied his face for a moment. "Why didn't you tell me you were an engineering student right away?" Damon shrugged. "You didn't ask. You just assumed." The words hung between them, both of them understanding exactly what assumptions she had made and why. Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't apologize. "Well," she said finally, "thank you for solving the problem." Then she turned and walked toward her jet, leaving Damon standing on the tarmac, wondering if he would ever see the complicated woman in the designer suit again. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the airport, but Victoria Sterling couldn't stop thinking about it. She had made the meeting with Technova Industries, signed the deal that made her company worth $3 billion, and should have been celebrating the biggest success of her career. Instead, she found herself staring out the window of her corner office, replaying those moments on the tarmac over and over again, the way she had spoken to those workers, the assumptions she had made, the look in Damon's eyes when she dismissed him as just a baggage handler. Every time she remembered it, she felt a sick feeling in her stomach that she wasn't used to experiencing. Victoria had built her entire career on being right, on making quick decisions and trusting her instincts about people. But Damon Rodriguez had proven her completely wrong, and that realization was eating away at her in ways she didn't expect. "Miss Sterling?" Her assistant Kevin knocked on her office door. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review." "Come in," Victoria said. Turning away from the window, Kevin set a stack of papers on her desk, but instead of leaving immediately, he hesitated by the door. "Is everything okay? You've seemed a little distracted lately." Victoria looked at him for a moment. Kevin had been working for her for 2 years, and in all that time she had never really asked him about his background, his goals, or what he wanted to do with his life. She had simply assumed he was content to be an assistant forever. "Kevin," she said slowly, "what did you study in college?" He looked surprised by the question. "Engineering, actually. Mechanical engineering. I graduated from Colorado State." Victoria felt another wave of that uncomfortable feeling. "Then why are you working as my assistant?" Kevin shrugged. "Student loans were pretty heavy, and I needed a job right away. Your company pays well, and I figured it would be good experience working with technology companies. I've been hoping to maybe transfer to your engineering department eventually." "You've been hoping?" Victoria repeated. "For how long?" "About 1.5 years, Kevin admitted." Victoria stared at him. Here was someone with an engineering degree who had been working for her for 2 years, hoping for a chance to use his actual skills, and she had never even bothered to find out about his qualifications. How many other people had she dismissed or overlooked simply because of the role they happened to be in when she met them? "We'll talk about that transfer soon," she told Kevin. "Very soon." After he left, Victoria found herself thinking about Damon again. She picked up her phone and, almost without thinking, called the airport. "Denver International Airport, ground operations." A voice answered. "Hi, this is Victoria Sterling. I'm looking for information about one of your employees." "Damon Rodriguez, hold on a moment," the voice said. After a brief pause, a different person came on the line. "This is Jake Thompson, lead mechanic." "You're asking about Damon?" "Yes, I wanted to thank him properly for helping with my aircraft a few weeks ago." There was a pause. "Ma'am, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Damon was pretty upset after that incident. The way you spoke to him wasn't right." Victoria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I know. That's why I'm calling. I want to make it right somehow." "Well," Jake said slowly, "I can tell you that Damon's a good kid. He works 3 different jobs to pay for school and help support his little sister. She's got some medical bills that insurance doesn't cover, but he never complains, never takes shortcuts, and he's always willing to help when we need his expertise." "His expertise?" "The boy's brilliant, Miss Sterling. Top of his class at UC, from what I hear. He's written papers on aircraft design that some of our senior mechanics can barely understand. But he doesn't act like he's better than anyone else. Treats every job with respect, whether he's loading bags or solving complex engineering problems." Victoria felt worse with every word Jake spoke. Is there anything I can do to make up for how I treated him?" You could start by treating people with basic respect regardless of what job they're doing, Jake said bluntly. But if you really want to help Damon specifically, the kid's brilliant enough that he should be getting opportunities to use his skills. After hanging up, Victoria sat in her office for a long time thinking. Finally, she made another call, this time to her head of human resources. Janet, I need you to research someone for me. Damon Rodriguez. He's a student at the University of Colorado studying aerospace engineering. Okay, Janet said slowly. What kind of research? Academic records, any published papers, recommendation letters from professors? I want to know everything about his qualifications and potential. Is this for a job opportunity? Victoria paused. Maybe, just get me the information first. The research came back 2 days later, and Victoria was stunned by what she read. Damon wasn't just a good student. He was exceptional. His grade point average was nearly perfect, and he had published 2 research papers on sustainable aviation technology that had been cited by industry professionals. His professors described him as one of the most promising students they had taught in years. But what struck Victoria most was a note in his file about his work-study situation. Damon was working 25 hours a week at the airport, 15 hours a week at a local restaurant, and still maintaining his academic performance while helping to pay for his sister's medical treatments. The girl had a rare condition that required expensive therapy, and their parents couldn't afford the full cost. Victoria stared at the papers on her desk, feeling something she wasn't sure she had ever experienced before. Genuine shame. Here was someone who was working harder than most people she knew, achieving more than most people could dream of, and she had dismissed him as unworthy of her time because of the uniform he wore to one of his 3 jobs. That evening, Victoria found herself driving to the airport. She wasn't sure what she planned to say, but she knew she had to see Damon again. She parked in the short-term lot and walked to the baggage handling area, feeling awkward and out of place in her business suit. Excuse me, she said to a worker she didn't recognize. Is Damon Rodriguez working tonight? The man looked at her suspiciously. Who's asking? My name is Victoria Sterling. I met him a few weeks ago. The man's expression changed immediately. Oh, you're the lady who yelled at him about the plane. Victoria winced. Yes, that's me. Damon's over by gate B12 loading a flight to Seattle. But listen, lady, that kid's been through enough. He doesn't need any more grief from people who think they're better than him. I'm not here to give him grief, Victoria said quietly. I'm here to apologize. The man studied her face for a moment, then nodded toward the gate. B12. But if you upset him, you'll have to deal with all of us. Victoria found Damon loading heavy bags onto a conveyor belt, his movements efficient and practiced. When he saw her approaching, he straightened up, his expression wary. Miss Sterling, he said politely, is there another problem with your aircraft? No, Victoria said, suddenly feeling nervous in a way she hadn't experienced since she was a teenager. I came to apologize, and to ask you some questions if you have a few minutes. Damon glanced around at his co-workers who were making no effort to hide their curiosity. I'm working right now. I can wait until your break, or until your shift ends, however long it takes. Something in her tone must have convinced him that she was serious because he nodded slowly. I get a 15-minute break in about an hour. There's a coffee shop near gate A15. Victoria spent the next hour wandering the airport, watching the constant flow of travelers and workers. She noticed things she had never paid attention to before. The way the cleaning staff worked around passengers without being acknowledged. The patience of the gate agents dealing with frustrated travelers. The coordination required to keep everything running smoothly. When Damon finally appeared at the coffee shop, he had changed out of his work uniform into jeans and a UC Colorado t-shirt. He looked younger somehow, more like the student he was rather than the worker she had first dismissed. I read about your research, Victoria said without preamble. The papers you published on sustainable aviation fuel. Damon looked surprised. You did? They're impressive. More than impressive. According to the industry experts I consulted, your work could revolutionize how we think about aircraft efficiency. Thank you, Damon said carefully. But I'm guessing you didn't come here just to discuss my research. Victoria took a deep breath. I came to apologize. The way I spoke to you that day was inexcusable. I made assumptions about you based on your job, and I was completely wrong. You saved my deal, probably my entire company, and I treated you like you were beneath my notice. Damon was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Why does it matter to you now? You got what you needed? Because I've been thinking about what kind of person I've become, Victoria said honestly. I've spent so much time climbing to the top that I forgot to look at the people around me as actual human beings. You reminded me that intelligence and worth aren't determined by someone's job title or the clothes they wear. And what are you planning to do with this realization? Victoria pulled an envelope from her purse and set it on the table between them. I'd like to offer you an internship at Sterling Tech Solutions. Full-time over the summer, part-time during the school year. You'd be working directly with our aerospace division on sustainable technology research. Damon stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Why? Because you're brilliant and talent like yours shouldn't be wasted loading baggage to pay for school. Because my company needs people who think the way you do. And because I want to prove to myself that I can be better than the person you met that day. What about your opinion of luggage handlers? Victoria felt her cheeks flush. You mean my former opinion? I learned something important from you, Damon. The value of a person has nothing to do with the work they're doing and everything to do with who they are. Damon finally picked up the envelope, but he didn't open it. This feels like charity. It's not charity, Victoria said firmly. It's an investment. In you and in the future of aviation technology. The offer comes with a competitive salary, tuition assistance, and the opportunity to turn your research into real-world applications. For the first time since she had arrived, Damon smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. I'll think about it. As Victoria drove home that night, she realized that something fundamental had shifted inside her. The success she had always chased suddenly seemed less important than the possibility of becoming the kind of person who could earn the respect of someone like Damon Rodriguez. 6 months later, Victoria barely recognized her own company. The changes had started small, with Kevin's transfer to the engineering department and Damon's acceptance of the internship position. But those decisions had rippled outward in ways Victoria never expected. Damon had proven to be everything his professors claimed and more. Within his first month at Sterling Tech Solutions, he had identified 3 major inefficiencies in their aerospace division and proposed solutions that could save millions of dollars annually. His research on sustainable aviation fuel had caught the attention of major airlines, and Victoria found herself fielding calls from companies wanting to license his innovations. But it wasn't just Damon's technical skills that impressed her. It was the way he treated everyone around him with the same respect and consideration. Whether he was talking to the CEO or the person who cleaned the offices, he remembered people's names, asked about their families, and somehow made everyone feel valued. Damon's presentation to the Boeing executives is scheduled for Thursday, Kevin reported during their weekly staff meeting. The preliminary feedback on his fuel efficiency proposal has been overwhelmingly positive. Victoria nodded, but her attention was divided. Through the glass wall of the conference room, she could see Damon at his desk, patiently explaining something to Lisa, one of the junior engineers. Lisa was nodding enthusiastically, scribbling notes as fast as she could write. Miss Sterling? Kevin's voice brought her back to the meeting. Sorry. What were you saying about the quarterly projections? After the meeting, Victoria found herself walking over to Damon's workspace. The aerospace division had been expanded into a larger area to accommodate the growing team, and Damon's desk was covered with technical drawings, research papers, and what looked like airplane engine components. How's the Boeing presentation coming along? She asked. Damon looked up from his computer screen, where he was running some kind of complex simulation. Really well, actually. The fuel efficiency improvements are even better than I initially calculated. We're looking at a potential 30% reduction in fuel consumption for medium-range flights. That's incredible, Victoria said, and she meant it. Do you realize what this could mean for the aviation industry? I have some idea, Damon said with a grin. But honestly, I'm more excited about what it could mean for the environment. 30% less fuel consumption means 30% fewer emissions. If we can get this adopted across the industry, we could help save the planet, Victoria finished, one airplane at a time. It was conversations like this that had gradually changed Victoria's entire perspective on business. Before meeting Damon, she had focused solely on profit margins and market share. Success meant beating the competition and maximizing shareholder value. But Damon approached every project with a different question. How can this make the world better? Can I ask you something? Victoria said, settling into the chair next to his desk. Of course. Why did you accept the internship? After the way I treated you that day at the airport, you had every right to tell me to get lost. Damon leaned back in his chair, considering the question. A few reasons, I guess. First, the opportunity was too good to pass up. Working on real aerospace projects instead of just theoretical problems in class, that's what I've been dreaming about since I was a kid. And the other reasons? Well, Damon said carefully, I could see that you were genuinely sorry about what happened. Not just sorry that you got caught being rude, but actually sorry about who you had become. That takes a certain kind of courage to admit. Victoria felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the office temperature. And I guess I wanted to see if people really can change. If someone who seemed so focused on status and money could learn to value different things. What's your verdict so far? Damon smiled. Still collecting data, but the preliminary results are promising. Their conversation was interrupted by Lisa, the junior engineer who approached with a stack of papers and an excited expression. Damon, I ran those calculations you suggested, and you were absolutely right. The turbulence reduction modifications could improve passenger comfort by 40%, while actually reducing manufacturing costs. Victoria watched as Damon reviewed Lisa's work, offering encouragement and asking thoughtful questions that helped her think through the problems herself. She had noticed that he never made people feel stupid for not understanding something, even when the concept seemed elementary to him. This is excellent work, Lisa, Damon said finally. Why don't you include these findings in Thursday's presentation? Boeing will be very interested in passenger comfort improvements. After Lisa left, beaming with pride, Victoria shook her head in amazement. You realize you just gave away credit for an innovation that could be worth millions of dollars? I didn't give anything away, Damon said. Lisa did the calculations and drew the conclusions. I just pointed her in the right direction. Most people in this business would have claimed that idea as their own. Most people in this business are focused on the wrong things, Damon replied. Success isn't about taking credit. It's about solving problems and helping people grow. That evening, Victoria found herself staying late at the office, something she had been doing more often lately. But instead of working on financial reports or strategic planning, she was reading through the employee feedback surveys that HR had recently conducted. The results were eye-opening. Employee satisfaction had increased dramatically over the past 6 months. People felt more valued, more heard, and more excited about their work. Several employees specifically mentioned the positive changes in company culture and leadership. One comment stood out. Management seems to actually care about us as people now, not just as workers. It feels like we're all working towards something meaningful together. Victoria realized that the changes in her company reflected changes in herself. Damon's influence had extended far beyond the aerospace division. His approach to treating people with dignity and respect had become a model that others, including Victoria, had begun to follow. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her sister Rebecca, whom she hadn't spoken to in months. Saw the article about your company in Tech Weekly. Dad would be proud of what you're building there. Call me when you get a chance. Victoria stared at the message for a long time. Her father had been an engineer before starting his own small manufacturing company. He had always emphasized the importance of treating workers fairly and building products that made people's lives better. Somewhere along the way, in her drive to succeed, Victoria had forgotten those lessons, but Damon had reminded her. The next morning, Victoria arrived at the office to find Damon already at his desk as usual. But instead of working alone, he was surrounded by several other engineers all looking at something on his computer screen. What's going on? Victoria asked. Damon's been working on something after hours, Kevin explained. A project that isn't officially part of his internship duties. Show her, Lisa urged. Damon looked a little embarrassed. It's probably nothing. Just an idea I've been playing with. Don't be modest, said Tom, one of the senior engineers. This could revolutionize aircraft design. Reluctantly, Damon turned his computer screen toward Victoria. The display showed a complex 3D model of what appeared to be a completely new type of aircraft engine. It's a hybrid propulsion system, Damon explained. It combines traditional jet fuel with electric power, but the electric component isn't just for backup. It's integrated into the primary propulsion system to maximize efficiency at different altitudes and speeds. Victoria studied the design, trying to understand the implications. What kind of efficiency improvements are we talking about? Conservatively, 50% reduction in fuel consumption. Optimistically, we could be looking at engines that use 70% less fuel than current models. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed what that could mean. Victoria felt her heart racing as she realized she might be looking at the future of aviation. "Damon," she said slowly, "this isn't an internship project anymore. This is the foundation of an entire company." "I know it seems ambitious," Damon said quickly, "but the theoretical foundation is solid. And with the right team and resources—" "No," Victoria interrupted. "You misunderstand me. I'm not saying it's too ambitious. I'm saying it's exactly what this company should be focused on." She looked around at the gathered engineers, all of whom were staring at the screen with expressions of excitement and possibility. "How would you feel about leading a dedicated research team?" Victoria asked Damon. "Full funding, complete creative control, and a percentage of any patents that result from your work?" Damon's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But I have one condition." "What's that?" Victoria smiled. "I want to be involved. Not as your boss, but as a partner. I want to learn from you, the way you've already taught me so much about what really matters." As she looked around at the faces of her team, Victoria realized that this moment felt different from any business success she had achieved before. This wasn't about beating the competition or maximizing profits. This was about building something meaningful with people she had grown to respect and care about. And it had all started with a broken sensor on an airplane, and a young man who had the courage to speak up despite her dismissive attitude. For the first time in her life, Victoria understood the difference between success and significance. 2 years had passed since the day Victoria Sterling's plane broke down at Denver International Airport, and she could hardly believe how much her life had transformed. Standing in the same hangar where she had once berated the ground crew, she watched as technicians made final preparations for the test flight of the first aircraft, powered by Damon's revolutionary hybrid engine. The prototype was beautiful, sleek and efficient in a way that traditional jets could never be. More importantly, it represented everything Victoria had learned about the difference between true innovation and simple profit-seeking. This wasn't just a new product. It was a potential solution to one of the world's biggest environmental challenges. "Nervous?" Damon asked, walking up beside her. He wore a flight suit now, having obtained his pilot's license as part of the development process. The transformation from luggage handler to lead engineer to test pilot still amazed Victoria, though she had come to understand that Damon had always possessed these capabilities. She had simply been too blind to see them. "Terrified," Victoria admitted, "but also more excited than I've ever been about anything." The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of development, testing, and gradual falling in love. Victoria wasn't sure exactly when her respect for Damon's intelligence had evolved into something deeper. Maybe it was during those long nights in the lab when he patiently explained complex engineering concepts to her, or perhaps it was when she watched him interact with his sister during her medical treatments, seeing the gentle strength that defined his character. What she did know was that somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing Damon as an employee or even a business partner. He had become the person she most wanted to share her successes and failures with, the one whose opinion mattered more than any board of directors or industry expert. "All systems check out perfectly," called Jake Thompson, the former airport mechanic who now headed their ground support team. Victoria had hired Jake and several other airport workers after realizing that the aviation industry's best talent often went unrecognized. "We're ready for takeoff whenever you are." Damon squeezed Victoria's hand briefly before walking toward the aircraft. They had kept their relationship private, wanting to ensure that their professional partnership remained respected by their team. But Victoria felt the absence of his touch immediately, a reminder of how much he had come to mean to her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon's voice came through the hangar speakers as he settled into the pilot's seat. "This is definitely not your average test flight. If this works, we're going to change aviation forever. If it doesn't work, well, let's hope it works." His humor drew chuckles from the assembled team, but Victoria could hear the underlying seriousness. They had invested everything in this moment, not just financially but emotionally. The hybrid engine represented 3 years of 18-hour days, countless prototypes, and the dreams of everyone who believed that business could be a force for positive change. The engine started with a sound unlike anything Victoria had ever heard. The traditional jet noise was there, but muted and somehow more musical. The electric components added a subtle hum that made the entire aircraft seem more alive than mechanical. "Engine performance looks incredible," reported Lisa, who now served as the chief systems analyst. "Fuel consumption is running 68% below traditional engines. Emissions are practically negligible." Victoria watched through the hangar windows as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. Her phone buzzed with messages from reporters, investors, and aviation industry executives who were following the test flight remotely, but all of that felt secondary to the simple hope that Damon would return safely and successfully. "Tower, this is Sterling Hybrid 1 requesting permission for takeoff." Damon's voice crackled through the radio. "Sterling Hybrid 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Make history." The aircraft accelerated down the runway with surprising quietness, lifting off smoothly and climbing into the clear Colorado sky. Victoria found herself holding her breath as she watched the prototype bank gracefully to the east, beginning the flight pattern they had planned for the test. "All systems nominal," Damon reported. "The hybrid propulsion is performing exactly as designed. Fuel efficiency is actually exceeding our projections." For the next hour, Victoria and the team monitored every aspect of the flight. The aircraft performed flawlessly, demonstrating not just the viability of the hybrid engine, but its clear superiority to traditional propulsion systems. When Damon finally landed and taxied back to the hangar, the entire team erupted in cheers. Victoria was the first person to reach the aircraft as Damon climbed out of the cockpit. Without thinking about who might be watching, she threw her arms around him, feeling tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "No," Damon said, holding her tightly. "You did it. You took a chance on a luggage handler with big ideas, and you built a company that could turn those ideas into reality." "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Victoria replied. "You changed everything. You changed me." When they finally separated, Victoria noticed that their entire team was watching with broad smiles. The secret of their relationship had apparently been the world's worst-kept secret. "So," Jake called out with a grin, "when's the wedding?" Victoria felt her cheeks turn red, but Damon just laughed. "Actually," he said, reaching into his flight suit pocket, "I was hoping we could discuss that." Victoria's heart stopped as Damon pulled out a small box and dropped to one knee right there on the hangar floor, in front of their entire team. "Victoria Sterling," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hangar. 2 years ago, you were the most difficult, arrogant, impossible person I had ever met." "This is the worst proposal speech in history," Victoria said through her tears, but she was laughing. "Let me finish," Damon said with a grin. "You were all of those things, but you were also brave enough to admit when you were wrong, smart enough to change, and determined enough to build something amazing. You taught me that people can grow beyond who they used to be." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "You also taught me that the best partnerships aren't based on what people can do for each other, but on what they can build together. Will you marry me?" Victoria looked down at this extraordinary man who had entered her life as someone she dismissed and had become someone she couldn't imagine living without. Around them, their team waited in expectant silence. "Yes," she said, not caring that her voice was shaky with emotion. "Of course, yes." As Damon slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, Victoria thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with her worst behavior, her most prejudiced assumptions, and her complete inability to see value in people who didn't fit her narrow definition of success. But Damon had seen through all of that to something better underneath. He had been patient enough to let her grow, generous enough to forgive her initial treatment of him, and wise enough to show her what really mattered in life. 6 months later, Victoria stood in a completely different kind of hangar, this one decorated with flowers and filled with an unusual mix of wedding guests. Aviation industry executives sat next to airport ground crew members. University professors chatted with luggage handlers. Damon's sister, now healthy thanks to the health insurance Victoria's company provided to all employee families, served as maid of honor. "Do you, Victoria, take Damon to be your husband?" the minister asked. "I do," Victoria said, looking into the eyes of the man who had taught her that true wealth had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with the relationships you build and the positive impact you have on the world. "Do you, Damon, take Victoria to be your wife?" I do, Damon replied, squeezing her hands gently. As they kissed to seal their marriage, Victoria heard the sound of aircraft engines overhead. She looked up to see a formation of planes flying past, including several that were now powered by hybrid engines, based on Damon's original design. The technology they had developed together was already being adopted by airlines around the world, reducing emissions and proving that environmental responsibility and business success could go hand in hand. But more than that, Victoria had learned that the most important changes weren't in technology or business practices. They were in how you treated the people around you, how you recognized value and potential in unexpected places, and how you remained open to becoming better than you used to be. Later, as they danced at their reception, Damon leaned close to her ear. "Any regrets about marrying the luggage handler?" he asked with a smile. Victoria laughed. "Just one. What's that?" "I regret that it took a broken airplane sensor for me to meet the most remarkable person I've ever known." "Well," Damon said, spinning her around the dance floor, "sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places." As Victoria looked around at their celebration, surrounded by people from all walks of life who had become family, she knew that Damon was absolutely right. The day her plane had broken down at Denver International Airport, she thought it was the worst thing that could happen to her. Instead, it had been the beginning of the best part of her life. She had learned that true success wasn't measured in dollars or deals, but in the lives you touched and the love you shared. And she had found both in the most unexpected place of all, in the heart of a young man who had the courage to speak up when everyone else had given up, and the patience to see the best in someone who hadn't yet learned to see it in herself.